Today on episode 21 of the podcast, we will be discussing Steve Carell leading a new comedy series from the creator of Ted Lasso, and Scarlett Johansson is fighting back against AI. We'll also give our thoughts on Prime Video's Fallout series and review the movie Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. I'm Brad, that right over there is a Josh, and we welcome you to We'll Bring the Popcorn.
First story this week comes from HBO. We have Steve Carell, who has been tapped to play the lead in a new comedy series from the creator of Ted Lasso and Scrubs. I'm very excited about this. You got Steve Carell returning to, regular episodic television, and it's coming from HBO.
Yeah, I absolutely love what Bill Lawrence did with Scrubs, with Ted Lasso. Both of those series are very much alike because they had some great, silly comedy, but they also hit you. Like Scrubs, when it was out, I didn't expect the darker parts when things were going wrong. But they got really emotional and hard-hitting. Same thing with Ted Lasso. So I'm going to expect something similar that's very funny but heartfelt and has kind of more heavy-hitting stuff along that series. But yeah, Steve Carell and Bill Lawrence together sounds like a really good mashup.
And it sounds like he's going to be playing the role of a father who has kind of a complicated relationship with his daughter who is off in college. So we'll see what they do with that. But to your point, those two series both have such amazing writing and have, are two very popular series, so I think he's in good hands there. But yeah, I'm excited to see what Steve Carell does. I love Steve Carell anyway. He's managed to have a career now where he's done both comedy and serious roles and has been very successful in both. But it sounds like he's working his way back into comedy a little bit. I know we just reviewed his, voice work in the movie If that we just did last week. Go back in the archives and check out our thoughts on that. But he does seem to be leaning back into comedy a little bit more now, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, it's great to see him back in a series again. I know he did that spoof NASA show, which I never really got into. I felt like it was a little just
too much.
Man, it just never hit that well for me. But to see him in a series like this, I think this is going to be a much higher quality show than that one was to me.
I hope so. That's definitely one to look forward to.
Yeah. Another to look forward to is we have the final Fast and Furious movie should be going into production soon, and they gave a little talk about it, saying that it might be going back to being more street racing, be a little more grounded, because, since the third one, it's been, really over the top, or the fourth one, really, that it's been really over the top spy action espionage type of thing to end it where it began. It just makes sense.
Well, once you start having flying cars in outer space at that point, where can you really go from there, right? So I like that it might go back to a little bit more of a grounded approach and kind of just bring the whole story full circle, right? Because they're coming up on the end of, these sets of films, and to kind of get it back to where it all started, back to like the street level racing, what made it so popular to begin with is, I think, a good idea and a good direction for them to take moving towards the end, because like you said, they've gotten so I don't want to say cartoonish now, but at this point, but they kind of are, because it's just so over the top, and everybody's like, the joke's like family, it's kind of become a little bit of a meme of itself, but it still makes a ton of money. So, I mean, they're still very popular films, but having it kind of come full circle and be back into maybe focusing on street racing again, I think is a good idea.
I still remember texting you when the trailer for Fast 10 came out, and I counted the number of families in the trailer, and it was like over 20 for how many times he said family. All right, we get it, that family's important. But,
right.
And then you pull 2 helicopters down with a car, going back more grounded, doing the street racing stuff again, I think it can only be good for the series to end on a good note like that, because there's also rumors that they might have Brian's character returning with, his brother, Paul Walker's brother, playing him again with some CGI, that he might be involved, and I'm still mixed on that aspect of it, bringing someone back from the dead. I mean, they were so close to him, so if they're feeling right, then who are we to tell them not to do something like that? But just hopefully it does good for them and the series to wrap it up closer to home, back to where they started, and end it on a high note.
Yeah, I'd like to see how they wrap the whole thing up eventually at the end too, because it's they've gone on a journey for this. They've gone all over the world at this point, and just to see, do all these characters get a happy ending? Do they not get a happy ending? it'll be fun to see where the series winds up, because I think these last two, I want to say two films that they've got left, two or three maybe.
It's back and forth, because I've heard the 11th is a final one, but I've also heard they're doing 11 and 12.
Right.
So yeah, it's
you just never know, right? It could be one of those that
this
they
is
say
the
they're
last
done.
one.
Yeah, it's the last one. We promised this one is the last one.
47 more movies. This is the last one.
Right. Like, smart marketing, I guess, but it's all good. But yeah, I'm excited because this series has been around over 20 years at this point now. So like it's crazy that it's lasted as long as it has, and still, like, even now as popular as ever, really, because it's each one of these films pretty much anymore makes $1 billion when you put them out. So
They also cost $1 billion to make.
yeah, I can imagine it would. Like, the cast keeps growing, it keeps adding big names keep coming back, and they're
We need 700 cars. We're going to blow up 690 of them.
right. So I can imagine the cost tied to the film too. I'd love to do a business case study on that, just to see what it costs versus what they make off it. But I can imagine it's still a pretty penny. They keep making them, so we're excited for that. So now we've got some news coming out of DC. The long-awaited Lantern series has got a little bit of an update as well. It's going to have the writers from The Lost and The Watchmen, as well as a writer from Ozark, that are going to be penning this series. And it's something that, fans have been clamoring for a while now. I know there was some talk of potentially the actor that played John Diggle in the Arrow series was going to become the Lantern to kind of take off on it. Hasn't really been confirmed that he's going to be a part of it, but it does seem like we've got some movement on the Lantern series finally.
And I believe we've already got Nathan Fillion that's going to be playing a version of a Lantern, which we don't know if he's part of the show, which everything's supposed to be connected now with DC. So I would assume he's going to be showing up, unless, where he shows up. I think it's supposed to be a cameo in Superman or something else. I know he's already been talked about, but there's some heavy hitters. You have Damon and you have Chris Mundy. Both of those are really big guys. I haven't watched Ozark. I've heard amazing things about it. Yeah. I haven't gotten around to watching it yet, but they're pretty heavy hitters to be doing this Lantern series, which you kind of need, because it is I wouldn't say odd property, but it's a difficult property to deal with when you're dealing with basically magic rings that can create whatever they want, and they all have different properties based on, their color and everything else, depending if who's wielding it and all that. As we saw from Ryan Reynolds' movie, it's not the easiest thing to bring into live action.
Yeah, they've got a little bit of redeeming to do for that property just because of the Ryan Reynolds film. Like, that film got hit, I think, a little bit unnecessarily. So I don't think it's as bad. I'd love to see what people think about that film, kind of like coming back around to it like they do with the Star Wars prequels that everybody hated at the time, and then they're starting to get a little bit more love moving forward. And I hope that's the case for the Ryan Reynolds film. It's not the best, but I don't think it's as bad as so many people made it out. I think
it's probably moving into guilty pleasure territory
that
you can still do.
It could be.
I enjoyed it. It can be a guilty pleasure for me to watch. It's not the best movie, but I can have fun watching it.
Yeah, for sure. But they do have a little bit of redeeming to do there. Like you said, the practicality of the type of character that the Lanterns are, the CGI has to be on point to make it look a little bit believable, but we'll see what they do with it as far as, putting money towards it and, how practical they make everything. But I'm excited about this because, Green Lantern is one of the pillars of the big, DC characters. He's, one of the main Justice League members for a reason. So it's exciting to get some movement on that finally.
So speaking of pillars of Marvel and Spider-Man, we have Venom: The Last Dance coming out this fall. Sony has confirmed, even though the title does give it away, but you never know with films anymore. Yep. This is going to be the final Tom Hardy Venom movie. We've got 3 out of it. Kind of surprised we've gotten 3. Let There Be Carnage was fun, but Carnage needs that hard R. He is a very dark character, and absolutely. I think they did an okay job with it. It hasn't been top MCU level with Venom, but it's been fun overall. But we're getting 3 films. Are we finally going to get Spider-Man showing up in here? We had a little bit of Tom Hardy showing up at the end of No Way Home. Is that hinting that we're going to see a crossover here? Or are we going to possibly see a crossover Spider-Man 4? Are we going to get the symbiote suit and Tom Holland Spider-Man 4 or not? It's kind of ending one, but also does Marvel and the MCU now run with Venom and the symbiote suit in a completely different way?
They could, but like you said, it's surprising that they're getting a third one without being directly connected to Spider-Man, really, because Venom is one of those characters. Like, you see so many different iterations of characters showing up in multiple different comic properties and facing multiple different villains fighting different heroes, but Venom is one that seems to be almost exclusively attached to Spider-Man. Really. And the fact that you're in the third film of this set now and there's really been no connection to Spider-Man, it's surprising that they've lasted as long as they have. But it's kind of gotten to that point now where like he's not really a villain like he was for so much of his run in the Spider-Man comics, but he's moving more into that anti-hero type territory that, you know, you can only do so much with that without really bringing in the reason that it's connected to Spider-Man. And it's interesting to see, you know, what they do to wrap this up. Like you said, do they end it connecting to the MCU, and then maybe it's finding a new host at this point. Maybe Tom Hardy isn't necessarily attached to it, but they find somebody else to play it for maybe, you know, some kind of involvement in the next Spider-Man film. We don't know. There's not a ton about the film that we really do know plotline wise yet that we're very interested to learn about, but it's going to be exciting. I'm genuinely surprised we haven't seen the trailer for it.
Yeah, you think it's September, October, somewhere in there supposed to be out.
We haven't even had a trailer for it yet.
Yeah, hopefully we see something soon. Yeah. I'm hopeful for it. I've enjoyed the other two, but it's had its issues, and a lot of it does ring because he is the more anti-hero Venom. We didn't get the villain, you know, that's through the other suits that he's fighting against. So you've gotten, in a way, the villain Venom, but of course it walks that line of, all right, I just saved these people, I'm going to eat him. Like, type of deal. Like, okay, no, we're not going to eat him. We need to stay good. Aw. It's been fun, but I think it needs to end with some sort of connection to Spider-Man. Like, if you have 3 films that just do not touch base with Spider-Man at all, like when most people think of Spider-Man, the first villain that's going to probably pop in their head is Venom. Green Goblin and others are going to be really high up there, but Venom is one that's very, as you mentioned, very tightly around Spider-Man. Like,
absolutely.
And not to have him in 3 films, like, hopefully they figure out something there. Maybe it's the film ends with he releases a symbiote suit and it finds its way into, you know, Tom Holland's Earth, and then Spider-Man 4 picks up with him finding the symbiote suit, and we get that MCU continuation without Tom. But we just don't know where it's going to go. We hope it's going to be good. Just, you know, Sony hasn't had the best track record lately with the Marvel films it's done. Just hope they've done enough for this one, especially Tom Hardy having kind of creativeness, control with it. Sure. Hopefully that leads to this be a good finale.
Yeah, I hope so too, and we'll keep an eye on that moving forward. So moving on to a series that, you know, you and I just finished reviewing and loved as much as we did was X-Men 97, and we got a little bit of news about season 2 now. Season 2 is actually currently in the editing phase. They are going to keep kind of the creative vision that the original showrunner had. I know there had been work already started on season 2 by the time he left the project. So it sounds like they're going to finish his vision of season 2 and then kind of start with a new head writer for season 3. That's also exciting to know that they are doing at least 3 seasons of this. I know you and I are both very much looking forward to the next steps in that story, which we've outlined, you know, in our reviews and our summary of the season last week. But I'm excited for this. There's some news, and it does seem like it's picking up a little bit of steam.
See, with what I said last week when we reviewed the finale of X-Men 97, give me season 2 now. Like, I am ready to watch it. They did such an incredible job. Absolutely. I think Bo, who was let go, did the first quarter to half or so of season 2, and they finished it off, and then they'll move on to someone else in season 3. But I hope it keeps the quality up. They know kind of what it took to get this season done and what the fans' reaction has been. So I know their top priority is making sure they continue that in a great way, and they really set up some intriguing storylines to continue in season 2.
Absolutely. Very excited about that. And it's one we're going to be waiting as patiently as we possibly can for this next one to come out, but it's something that you and I both hold in very high regard based on the quality that they did and the fact that they're already this deep into season 2 that they're ready to start editing. We don't know necessarily if that means that they've got everything animated completely and they're just getting it edited down to be able to do voice recordings or what have you, but it does seem like they're pretty far along in the creative process on this, that maybe hopefully we get it sooner than later.
Yeah, I would assume 2025 to 2026, hopefully not into 2026, but animation takes a very long time.
It does.
Don't want them to rush it, but hopefully they've got enough done that 2025, even if it's fall or winter, isn't that far out. Because I think they're moving right into season 3 after they're done with it. Like, they're not wanting to have a whole lot of time in between. So there could be maybe a little bit longer gap between season 1 and 2, but 2 and 3 will come a little bit quicker behind each other.
Even better. I'm excited for that too.
Yeah. One that I was kind of excited about, but it looks like we're not going to get now, set in the Spider-Man universe, was Silk at Amazon. It's apparently been canned. They're not going through with it anymore, with a very interesting line that came out of it saying that the executives asked for the writing team to make the series less about Silk. You're doing a series about Silk, and you're wanting to make it be less about Silk. Like, maybe it's a good thing this got canceled.
Yeah, every once in a while you hear one of these stories about like a show that gets a whole bunch of hype around it and then it just completely gets canned for one reason or another. And you're like, well, what happened? Well, it sounds like a case of too many hands in the cookie jar on this one because, you know, for what a lot of Amazon does right in their series, there's a lot of really, really, really good series. And spoiler alert, we're talking about one in a little bit. But it just seems like a really weird story to like take the focus off your main character. If anything, you want as much focus on your main character as you can, unless you were trying to turn this into more of an ensemble show. At that point, just change the whole premise of the show. You know what I mean? But
felt like just from that alone was feeling kind of Madam Web-ish to me. Like,
absolutely,
just
I was getting those vibes too.
Yeah, so I was really looking forward to it. This. Was announced a couple years ago that they were working on it, and we haven't heard much about it. And then, sorry, it's not happening anymore. Like, we don't know if maybe the character will show up again, because we did have the character was in the MCU live action Spider-Man. She wasn't Silk, but the character, she was there. But don't know if she was going to continue on playing the character, if they were going to cast someone else, and it'd be like the Sony stuff that it's outside of the MCU. But hopefully one day we'll see Silk show up, because I still want to see Silk. I want to see Spider-Gwen show up in the full suits and everything. Like, that is one of mine. Like, the Silk suit is great. That looks really good. Really that and Spider-Gwen, I love just the design that they did for both of those. Like, they were really good looking suits playing off of Spider-Man and everything. Like, I want to see those in live action. So let's get it together and try to hopefully maybe find someone else who could do Silk right.
I hope so. And it's just disappointing because, you know, I don't know how far along they were in the creative process on this. Obviously, I don't think they began production or anything on it, but it does sound like there may have been a decent amount of time put into it already. And it's always disappointing to hear when those things don't get picked up like that, or you have to, all these people that are working hard on it already have to move on to other projects. It's a little disappointing, but that's the nature of the business, right? So, you know, hopefully those people land on their feet and get to move on to the next project and have, you know, successful things that come out that we can all enjoy for sure. So another story that's come out from Marvel this week, Marvel Studios has announced that Wonder Man is going to fall under the Marvel Spotlight umbrella, which, if you don't know what Marvel Spotlight is, we've kind of talked about how Marvel Studios have kind of branched off each of their types of stories that they're going to tell. You're going to have animation be its own thing, TV be its own thing, and film be its own division. But the Marvel Spotlight is kind of a subdivision under the TV umbrella, maybe falls under some... It could potentially be one-off films as well, but I think they're going to focus more on television based on the properties that they've announced that are going to be a part of it. You know, the first of which was Echo, and then you're also going to have Daredevil Born Again fall under that Spotlight umbrella. But Wonder Man is also going to be a property that falls into this Spotlight umbrella. So we got some news finally about that. I know you and I have talked. We're not all that familiar with Wonder Man, but we're curious to see, you know, what story they tell with this.
Yeah, with everything we've seen in the MCU and Marvel in general, it's kind of nice to go into something a little blind. Like, I never really knew... I knew of the character, but I just never really got into anything that featured him that much or his storyline. So it could be fun, and it makes sense for a character like that who's a little more obscure to be in the spotlight. So, like, they're part of the MCU, but you're kind of out here on the outskirts and not... You know, it's not considered to be a main... big story point, and you know, maybe that's kind of how we go from here on, that they're going to stick to their tent poles with films, you know, a couple main TV series, and then you have maybe we'll run a single season of this character, that character, to give them a little love and show a little more expansion, because they did kind of go full bore into it with She-Hulk and Miss Marvel and Moon Knight and everything else, and they threw so many different characters that all of them kind of expected to have multiple seasons, and now most, if not all of them, are not getting, like, we've heard Moon Knight's getting a second season, but we haven't really heard anything on it since then.
Sure.
And so to stick them, probably those under the spotlight, that's probably a single season, makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, and, just speaking, like you said, we're going into this a little bit blindly, not knowing as much about the Wonder Man character. Obviously, when you say Wonder Man, it's going to draw instant comparisons to DC's Wonder Woman, who obviously is a significantly more popular character. And I wonder what kind of comparisons are going to be there. Do they have similar powers? I'm assuming they might. Obviously, he's not Amazonian or anything, but we'll see what they put together. But to be fair, like, I'm excited about these spotlight series too, because like you said, we enjoyed Echo a lot. Obviously, we've talked ad nauseum about Daredevil and our love for it. So if it sounds like they're going to put some strong focus on these one-off seasons of these shows, I'm all for it, especially with the track record they've had so far. Because I really, really enjoyed Echo a lot more than I thought I was going to, especially giving everything that went out to putting it out. But I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I mean, it could be fun. Like I said, go into something blind, not know about it, and not need to have everything else MCU to knowledge, which we do when it comes to the movies and everything. Most, not exactly to everything comic related, but at least what the live action TV and MCU stuff has done. To go into it kind of blind is going to be nice, and not have to worry about, oh, did I watch this first or that first or this first, to have these one-off stories. I think it's going to help Marvel in the end, that it lets them expand some characters to see if they want to use them in the future, or just to be able to tell some different stories and kind of mix things up a little bit.
Very exciting, for sure.
And so that's going to take a spot up, I'm guessing. Is that next year? That's one of the spots for Wonder Man? Yeah. Because we know, with the limits that they've set on themselves, it's two to three movies a year, 2 series a year. So that's actually Ironheart and Daredevil is next year. So this might not be until 2026 unless Spotlight falls under. Because this is where they can get themselves in trouble, that, Spotlight, it doesn't fall under that. So we're going to put out these Spotlight stuff, and then they're back in the kind of maybe the same mess, that they've got too much stuff going on again. But hopefully they have everything figured out right to get these out without waiting way too long. As I've mentioned too many times about Ironheart, it was filmed during the pandemic. We're 4 years, past when that started and everything. It's like we still haven't seen it. It's coming next year, but they need to get a little more tighter with filming to release and not waiting so many years before we get these series.
Couldn't agree more.
So yeah, we're not done with Marvel yet. So we have Michael Leslie, who last wrote The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. He will pen a movie we've been waiting for a while now. It's a little, small, independent movie called X-Men.
I love these little tiny project that nobody's been waiting on, right? But no, it's exciting because, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was a well-written movie. I know it got a little bit of mixed reception, but he's going to take the helm of X-Men. That's not a small undertaking. Like, it is very important for them to nail this. Like, we talk about some of the ones they need to nail moving forward. Like, Fantastic Four it's got to hit if it's going to be successful for them moving forward. X-Men is another one of those that you have to hit on, and you have to hit big. Like, it's going to make a good amount of money just because you slap X-Men on it. But the quality of the film needs to be there. And I think they may have the right guy in charge of writing it now. So I'm excited about that because, like you said, it's such a big... We say it tongue-in-cheek as a small independent thing, mainly because it's the exact opposite of that. Like, the X-Men are a foundation of Marvel Comics. So it's one of those... we talk about pillars a lot. You have, like, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men are, like, 3 of the 4 pillars of Marvel. You have to nail it.
Yeah, because what got me into comics was the X-Men. And it was more the X-Men, the animated series, along with Spider-Man and Teenage Mutant Turtles, Batman, all those animated series in the 90s got me into comics, but X-Men was the main one that got me into comic books. So I enjoyed the Fox movies. I mean, they had a couple, like, I love Oscar Isaacs, but him as Apocalypse, just that
Wasn't it?
That's got to be a CG character. You can't have a guy in makeup doing that. That's got to be a CG character that's humongous and everything else. It just was not that great.
Yeah, the joke of him looking more like a Power Rangers villain than a Marvel villain.
He looked like Ivan Ooze.
Right? It really did. But yeah, like I said, it's so critical that they nail this, and I'm excited to see what they come up with. They've already been slowly introducing the mutants into the MCU. Obviously, we've been talking ad nauseum. The whole world has been talking about Deadpool and Wolverine and how important that film is going to be.
We got multiple showing tickets booked.
Yeah,
we are prepared and ready to see Deadpool and Wolverine
many times. We will be contributing heavy to those box office numbers. But no, it's super important that they nail this, because it is one of those foundational pieces, like we keep saying, that you have to get right.
Yeah, I'm curious kind of the story that they're going to start with, because we know where X-Men started with Fox. It was all about Magneto and all that, and kind of the core storyline of between humans and mutants and all that. But, you know, they've kind of got out of doing full origin stories, kind of mixing things up. And you got to look at the big picture too, so they can't have a villain like Apocalypse show up that's not going to have the Avengers and everybody else with it. And, you know, we've heard rumblings of Doom. We're going to have Galactus and everything with Fantastic Four. Just exactly where X-Men comes out and where it fits in the timeline of what they're going to do with the story is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, we're excited for all of that, for sure. We're kind of pivoting now from one tentpole Marvel property to one that's a little less known, but it could potentially wind up being the most popular of all of it, just based on who's going to potentially be attached to it. So we've been talking about Scarlett Johansson being involved in kind of this top secret Marvel project that nobody really knows what it's going to be. Well, there's been a little bit of a leak, and we're not one to usually speculate on rumors so much as it is, you know, concrete stuff, but potentially we found out that the series that she could be working on is Blonde Phantom, which is a very obscure Marvel character, not well known, but it kind of takes place in 1950s Las Vegas. But the person that they're potentially tabbing or trying to eye for this main role is a musical artist you may have heard of by the name of Taylor Swift.
Never heard of her.
Never heard of her, right? But that is about as huge of a casting choice as you can make, because obviously, you know, people are speculating that she could show up as Dazzler or have some kind of role in Deadpool and Wolverine. But if she's being eyed for a TV series, that is huge.
Yeah, and so she's going all in then if she's leading up a series and stuff. Because, we've all heard the Deadpool and Wolverine rumors, that Dazzler. I'm thinking maybe more than anything we're going to get a song from her, as we did with Celine Dion, which was, I still go back and watch that music video, because not only is it's a good song, but it's just hysterical to watch. I'm assuming we're getting something just as humorous with Taylor Swift doing a video for Deadpool, and maybe she'll even dress up as Lady Deadpool or something in the video. It's going to be fun, but if she's looking to star, maybe even we get the lead into her character as they jump through a portal and there she is. Okay, well, you can Deadpool you can check out more next year on Disney Plus.
Some kind of fourth wall
break the fourth wall to bring her in, that is big if she is going to be starring in an MCU role. And it's also really interesting that we have Spider-Man Noir going on at Amazon set in the 1930s, and then the Blonde Phantom in the 1950s going some old classic type of series.
Maybe Fantastic Four.
Fantastic Four is rumored to be in the past, that maybe 60s, 70s, or even 50s. So maybe there's a lead between the Blonde Phantom and the Fantastic Four being set in the same time period. So there's a lot of interconnecting that can be going on here. But you get Taylor in anything, and you're already got a huge box office or a huge viewership just because of her following.
Yeah, if you want to boost subscribers and numbers on Disney Plus, that's how you do it. You put Taylor Swift on it, right?
Because they put her to a concert on Disney Plus too. So
and it did great numbers for them. So naturally, why wouldn't you want to try to get her for something else? And she's killing it literally everywhere she goes right now. Sold out football stadium tours all over the world, and just the biggest star in the world at the moment. You can land her for a project. It's a license to print money.
This just continues what we've talked about. I mean, she's done a couple little roles before this too, but she is this generation's Elvis. Elvis did quite a few movies and stuff too, so it makes sense that she's gonna come back to movies and do something like that. I don't know if I ever saw her doing a Marvel or a superhero role, but there's a lot of people I never thought John Malkovich would be in Fantastic Four. So, and it's one to keep an eye on. I don't know much about that character either, so we got a couple kind of more obscure characters coming out. But if they do it well, it could be a lot of fun and something new and interesting. Maybe this will come out under the spotlight as well to be kind of more of a one-off. With her schedule and her touring and everything else, how big are you going to be able to have this character be within the MCU? Because you would need her to time travel as well, sure, if she's going to come into the modern MCU.
And I think they're taking a little bit of a page out of their own playbook, betting big on an obscure property like they did with Guardians of the Galaxy, right? I remember the discourse around that when it came out, like Guardians of the Galaxy. These guys have like a handful of comics. What can we, how can it do as well as it does? And then it blows up into $1 billion franchise. So we'll see.
And
right?
3 of the best movies that MCU has put out.
Agreed.
James Gunn killed them.
Yeah. So I'm excited for that. We'll see what comes out of that, if that really is what she's working on, and if Taylor Swift decides to do it, that's a huge W for Marvel for sure.
So we've been talking pretty much nothing but Marvel for a while now. It feels like almost a whole episode, but there's been a lot of news and a lot of interesting news. Yeah. And kind of the final interesting news out of Marvel is that we're finally getting confirmation that Vision is returning. Yes. He's getting his own series. Paul Bettany is returning to play Vision. You have Terry Matalas from Star Trek Picard will be the showrunner. This is coming in 2026, so it's going to continue, where we left the character for WandaVision. So that's quite a different version of Vision left, and we're going to see where he ended up and potentially where he may be going into the MCU more, because there's been, we kind of thought after the last, with Endgame that Vision would probably be part of the Avengers still and be leading up that group or leading up other groups. Of course, WandaVision changed a lot of that. Yep. So we have a very interesting place for Vision to be left at the end of that, going into his own series. But I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I'm glad to see Paul Bettany's come back and, reached a new agreement with Marvel to come back and reprise this character, because he does have such an open-ended ending. For those of you that did watch WandaVision, you see what happens to his character and how he kind of, takes off, and you don't really know what happened. There had been speculation that he was going to show up in a few different properties at this point, the biggest one being Multiverse of Madness that he wound up not showing up in, but we finally get confirmation that he is coming back. It's exciting. Terry Matalas, who did a spectacular job on Picard, that was a huge hit for Paramount, so he's running the show. I'm excited about that, and we'll see where this character goes, because he became a very popular MCU character, and now we're kind of getting that continuation of his story and seeing where he goes, and hopefully makes his way back to a lot of the main group. I'm sure he has some pretty strong opinions on what happened to Wanda based on what happened in.
I was about to say, now we got to figure out what happens with Wanda now, because we left her in a very, is she gone? Is she still around? Yeah. Will the Vision series maybe pick up where he's trying to find out what happened to Wanda, or could it be something completely different of him trying to find out who he is now as the White Vision, and kind of where he lands? So there's a lot that they could go with, and if we get more Elizabeth Olsen Wanda, I'm all for it.
Absolutely. But it does sound like 2026, like you said, is when it's coming out. So definitely one to keep an eye on. And it sounds like they may start shooting that next year, I'm hoping. So.
Yeah, I think if it's going 2026, it's got to be within the next year that they start filming. And because Vision needs some special effects, but also everything he goes through for the makeup and all that. Like, they need some time to film that, especially if he's flying and moving around. Yeah, I would say probably maybe early to summer next year to have it ready for 2026, because I would assume that would mean that and Daredevil Born Again Season 2 would be the 2 series for 2026. Again, my mind always goes, once they announce this limit, all right, what is coming when? What are we getting here? Does the Spotlight stuff count now? Like, is that part of their series count? We're trying to figure out, are we still getting a bunch of stuff, but if it's just main Marvel television, we're only getting 2, because this could be a Spotlight series too, if it's it's more taking away from the MCU and him on a different journey.
It could. We'll see what they come up with as far as how it's connected, and the things that we can know about this series as we get more information, right? So exciting that he's coming back for sure.
Yeah, because after 2026, we're ramping up for the first Avengers film. Yep. We still don't really know if that's going to be about Kang or if it's going to be something different. So, this will be coming out, I think the first Avengers film is 2026 or 2027. Yeah. So it's going to be right on the heels of an Avengers film.
Yeah. I'm excited for that too. There's a lot to get together for them for that, but it seems like they're working towards, like we've talked about ad nauseum now, just the linear storytelling and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. But let's get away from Marvel a little bit. I know we've talked about Marvel a lot, and you're probably tired of hearing about us talk about Marvel, but we finally got confirmation on a big casting announcement for a film that we've been talking about quite a bit, pretty much since we've started doing the podcast, and that's 28 years later. We got confirmation Cillian Murphy is reprising his role for the film. That is huge. This cast is already absolutely stacked, but Cillian Murphy is back, and he's going to be a part of it.
Yeah, I love that. Past just executive producing it, he's going to get in front of the camera, and we don't really know kind of where his character has been this whole time and where it's going to lead and how much he'll be in it. But it's great just having someone as fantastic as Cillian to return in front of the camera for the series that really helped skyrocket him almost 28 years ago to get him into stardom here. And I love that he's decided and that they found the right way to bring him back. Because if you know about Cillian, he is very meticulous about what he chooses to do, about who he chooses to work with and everything else. So if he's chosen that he's going to come back and get in front of the camera, then they found something that he felt good about.
Which has me excited already for it. We're already excited about it, but the fact that he's confirmed to at least do it in some capacity, perfect. That makes me even more excited to check out that film.
Yeah, I can't wait to see 28 years later. It's the start of a new trilogy. It's going to be a lot of fun. They seem to be getting big names behind the camera, in front of the camera, all around. Like it was a smaller, more independent horror, smaller film, and now we're getting some powerhouse behind it. I hope that lends to it being really good.
I hope so too.
Moving on to some big pirate news. So Jerry Bruckheimer's been talking more about Pirates of the Caribbean lately, and we've had so many different stories come out lately, but he did confirm that there are 2 different Pirates of the Caribbean projects in the works. So we have a full reboot being written by Jeff Nathanson, who did The Lion King recently. He's going to be writing the full reboot, so just kind of restarting everything, which we've talked about ad nauseum, that it hasn't been that long. We've had, 4 films from that? Do we really need to reboot something that quickly? Hopefully it's good. But they're also still seemingly moving ahead with the Margot Robbie-led female Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yep. So we're getting one of each, right? So we're getting 2 different films. Doesn't sound like they're going to be connected in any way, shape, or form, but it's going to be 2 different stories. From what I was reading a little bit, the one that doesn't have Margot Robbie attached to it could be taking place earlier, like maybe before even the Johnny Depp portion of the stories that they told in that whole universe they set over those several films. But it's pirate films, right? Mm-hmm. Like you kind of know what you're going to get, but they're more often than not they're very entertaining, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like you said, the argument can be made: does it need to be rebooted? I don't necessarily call it a reboot if it takes place in a different time period. Yeah. That's like saying House of Dragon is a reboot of Game of Thrones when it takes place 1,000 years.
Well, it's kind of as they're referring to it as a reboot instead of a prequel or a remake or something else. Just the terminology used with it. If it's a prequel, call it a prequel instead of a reboot.
Right. But we could get into semantics there. But it does... I'm glad they are moving forward with the Margot Robbie film as well. Not to diminish that at all, because she's been in the rumor mill for being attached to this property for quite a while now. And obviously with all the stories that we've told about on the podcast, she's got a lot going on too, but it does sound like that's eventually going to get some legs too. We don't have any type of timeline as far as when these films are coming out, but if they're talking about them now, I'm assuming within the next couple years we'll get these films. So it's definitely an exciting time if you're a fan of Pirates of the Caribbean, like I know we both are.
Yeah, I still go back and watch the first one. The first one's still my favorite.
Absolutely.
It has that great adventure, the original introduction of Captain Jack Sparrow and all the characters. It just has kind of a magic about it that it was just so fun. Like, all right, you're making a movie about a theme park ride. Like, it was fantastic. And it still had some fun in the sequels, but it kind of got, out there and crazy with some of the stuff. And you had Johnny Depp's Captain Jack Sparrow take a little bit of a backseat in the last one they did. And Jerry even touched on him that he would absolutely love to have Johnny back as Captain Jack Sparrow. it's not off the table for him. He just doesn't know if Disney will kind of allow it to happen, because we know everything with him and his ex-wife and everything now, which, you know, we know how the case ended now. Sure. He shouldn't be held against him, but we don't know if Disney, and we've saw what Warner Brothers and everybody else has basically done with Johnny Depp since then, are they going to allow him to return to that iconic character?
But at the end of the day, I think if the story is right and the price is right, and you know there's an opportunity to throw a movie out there with Jack Sparrow and make a bunch of money, they're probably going to. It does seem like Johnny Depp's getting a little bit of a comeback started, I believe. I think he shot a film that was recently shown at the Cannes Film Festival that got like a standing ovation at the end of it. So I think you're starting to see a little bit more of Johnny Depp coming back into the spotlight as a, you know, big time A-list Hollywood actor, and he's starting to get some more work. So I think eventually the stars will align and he'll come back to that character at some point, I can see, because it was insanely popular. I know, like, we jokingly talk about nicknames that we have for our cars and stuff. I drive a black car and I call it the Black Pearl. You know, just kind of a, you know, a play on how much I love those movies as well. But it's, you know, it's definitely something I could see them going back to the well for.
What I miss seeing was Johnny Depp outside of the movie as Captain Jack Sparrow, because he would go to children's hospitals dressed up as Jack and stay full character, you know, being stabbed by a kid and pretending like, oh, okay. Like, he was so great with that. And then he would show up to Disneyland on the ride and he would just be pretending to be an animatronic. And then everyone's like, oh, that was Johnny Depp. Like, it just seemed he had so much fun with that character, and to have kind of, it's a little bit tainted for him, because he even talked about during his trial that he probably would never want to return. I think I've heard that he's loosened up on that a little bit after the trial, but there was some bad blood because of how quickly the studios just kind of cut off everything to him. You know, not taking sides on whether he was fully innocent or an Amber was all of it and everything else. It seemed both of them had a lot of issues and they were not good together, but I would love to see him again as that character. Like Captain Jack Sparrow, he's had a lot of iconic characters. I mean, Edward Scissorhands and so many others that he's done. But, you know, for most everybody that knows the name Johnny Depp in the last 10, 20 years, it's tied to Jack Sparrow.
Of course, yeah. And like, I hope that the story is right and they come to the right agreement and they can tell a good story and kind of give, you know, Captain Jack one last run, maybe, just to kind of, you know, put it into that character in a way that makes everybody happy. I think would be a good fitting in for that. Yeah,
and there's potential, could have a lot of fun here. You know, the reboot could be fun. Margot Robbie's could be fun. Maybe he just cameos in there as Jack Sparrow, if the other one's potentially be a prequel, or if we get another one with him that's outside of those two. But it's not a franchise that looks like it's going away anytime soon.
Nope. I mean, those films, like we talk about, if you're making money, they're probably going to try to throw another one out, right? Because how often do we talk about, you know, the fourth version of this or the sixth version of this or the fifth version of that? Like, if it's making money, they're going to keep going to that well until it doesn't, right? So why not? Why not make it happen, right?
Yep.
One of the news stories we talked about last week, we finally got a little bit of clarification on. So Comcast has announced the StreamSaver bundle that we mentioned before that combines Peacock, Netflix, and Apple TV. And we were trying to figure out, you know, what was it going to cost? Like, what was the whole story around what it was? But Comcast did announce a price point for this service. It's going to be $15 a month for these three services, which is, to their point, an incredible deal for these three services. They're going to be ad-supported. They're not going to be ad-free versions of it. I don't think they announced an upgraded ad-free version of it necessarily, but it sounds like you could get those bundled for $15 a month. But there is a little bit of a catch to the story. You can only sign up for it if you have Comcast services. So this is only being provided to people who have Comcast. So if you don't have Comcast, unfortunately, this isn't a bundle for you until you become a Comcast, you know, user.
Yeah, because this came out with all the other bundles that we're talking about, and it didn't specifically say that at that point it was just going to be for their customers, so it's broadband and TV. But now we know it's only for them. It is a pretty good price. I mean, $15 for Apple TV Plus, ad-supported Peacock and Netflix. It's not a bad deal, but you have to be a customer. It's kind of how they were open, and it's probably how they're able to offer it so cheap, because they had to probably work out deals between their services where they could offset that cost, because each of them are almost $15 each now. I mean, they're $10 to $15 each for the lowest tier.
Yeah, it's definitely a good deal if you already have that service and you're wanting to maybe save some money on those streaming services as well. It still doesn't make it less affordable for, broadband or internet users, because those prices are just continuously going up as well. But it does sound like a nice package for people who use that service. But it was just definitely something we wanted to highlight, because I know we had talked about it before with all these different bundling services and what that looked like for people. But, if you have Comcast, check it out if you maybe save a few bucks on the services that you were probably going to use anyway.
I have a feeling that's not going to be the last. We're probably going to hear the other broadband and TV providers starting to announce bundles and deals with their services to try to help offset costs, but also get more customers in. Like, this will just be the beginning, I feel, of these bundles.
A lot of them already have add-on options for services that they have deals with. I know YouTube TV has deals with like Showtime and stuff like that you can add. So, yeah, you're definitely right that it's definitely just kind of the tip of the iceberg of these types of things being offered by them, and we'll see how they shake out for people, and it's something worth keeping an eye on.
Because you even have cell phone providers. You got AT&T offers Max. You have T-Mobile, I think, does Netflix, and Mint Mobile just announced a deal with Peacock. You get like 6 months of Peacock with the new service and stuff. So, yeah, we're just going to be bundling everything now. Bundle is going to be the magic word in the industry for the next few years. So just bundle it all. They're going the progressive route, and you just bundle everything. Start seeing Flo popping up in every commercial for everything now. Like, she's just going to be everywhere bundling things for people.
She's the bundler. That should be her comic book character,
the bundler. Bring her into the DCU.
Oh, God, keep her away from that. Put her in the MCU at least.
Kind of going back to a story with Scarlett Johansson. So this isn't Marvel related, but it's AI related. So we've talked quite a bit about AI and its use in Hollywood and everything else. And we have this story that kind of shows that OpenAI was kind of being a little skeezy with things. So they approached Scarlett Johansson at one point, I believe it was last year, that they wanted to do an AI voice for ChatGPT. And they wanted Scarlett to do it. Of course, she was a voice of an AI in her, and they loved her voice, and they wanted her to do it. She said no because she just didn't feel right about it. While then ChatGPT launches a voice, and it sounds a lot like Scarlett Johansson.
Yep.
They even made a joke post, I believe, on Twitter that said "her" in it, which was the name of the movie she did. Like, we introduce you to her. Yeah, you got Scarlett without doing Scarlett, which is what we've been talking about with AI, is like, what is stopping AI companies from using your likeness, using your voice, using you for things without your consent, which she did not. She said, no, you're not allowed to use it. And they went ahead and did a sound-alike. Like, they went very, very similar to her voice. But the good news is she was able to fight back. She had her lawyers on it, went after them. They pulled it down pretty quickly. But it's also just makes you feel because they just went ahead and did it anyways.
Yeah, I mean, good for her for, standing her ground on this. And it's one of those things that, you can have pretty strong opinions about, like you said, with the whole name, image, and likeness deals. Like, you hear a lot about sports just to be able to make money off your name, right? Well, now it's moving into like these actors and these actresses being, lending their voice to things or potentially licensing the ability to use it. Like, I know one of the running jokes with like GPS was everybody wanted Morgan Freeman to read their directions to them, or Samuel L. Jackson to read their directions to them, or what have you. But there was ways for you to license your voice and, at least get properly, compensated for that. And it sounds like they just took the worst possible business approach, and honestly, it wasn't very smart to kind of take this almost identical sound. Like, I remember seeing some videos about the audio clips from some of this that people got a hold of it, and it sounds just like Scarlett. So it was very obviously a play on her, pun somewhat intended. But, the fact that she stood her ground, got this taken down and got this taken away because she didn't agree to it, like, that's a good precedent to set for everybody else. Like, if you're going to use people's voice, compensate them fairly for it. And if they're fine with that and you can reach an agreement, then that's perfectly fine. But if they're not in agreement to it, you just can't do that.
You see how we'll make it close, but no, you're using AI that already at the moment takes from everything you can find on the internet. So there really isn't anything that is truly original and new to most of the AI chat bots and everything else that you can get, because it's pulling from the knowledge base of the internet. Like, we had a controversy with Reddit that Reddit was offering, I don't know if it was OpenAI, but it was offering AI to be able to take everything that's been posted on Reddit and use it as information for their bots and stuff. It's pulling, all the images that you're creating, which I've created with AI and I've had fun with it. I haven't sold anything with AI because that just feels wrong. It's not creating something original. It's pulling from a bunch of different sources and bringing it together. That's why hands can look so deformed and messed up and other things do, because it's not at that level, and it's kind of scary where it could be going, because it's already pretty fascinating and crazy what it can do, and what it does if everyone starts adapting it is just going to be wild. And that's why what Scarlett did is important, like not only for celebrity wise, for all of us to be able to stand up for our rights of our voice, our likeness, our creations to belong to us and not an AI, is very important to stand against.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting precedent that's going to be set for everybody moving forward. Like we've said multiple times, and I don't want to get political on here, so I won't. But it's a good tool to use for a lot of things. There's a lot of benefits. I agree that AI can help with, but to replace a lot of human elements for things, I have a hard time agreeing that that's a good idea. Mm-hmm. But it seems to be the way the world's moving, so we'll see what the future holds for it. But like I said, good on her for standing her ground, getting this taken down, because they could have probably made a ton of money off of this, and she wouldn't have been fairly compensated at all. She would have been, out of luck because she didn't sign an agreement. But yeah, good on her, man. And hopefully if they can come to some kind of business agreement and have it work and have it launch properly and, ethically in the way things should be done, then I'm all for it.
Let's also think about what wild things could they make that AI say in her voice, and they could use against her and say, well, Scarlett said this racist thing. Well, no, that was the AI and not Scarlett. Like it's a very slippery slope with a lot of stuff with AI, and, letting your voice being used or your likeness being used for AI it's something I don't want to be involved with, and I'm glad she's kind of standing up, because like I said, there's so many different ways it could be abused. And if she's not getting, even if she was getting paid for it, there's so much stuff that you got to look at. Like, would it be the right thing to lend your voice to it? Yeah,
it's tough, and it's definitely something to keep an eye on moving forward. Mm-hmm. There's no good answer for it, but good for her. I'll kind of punctuate saying that. Good for her for standing up for herself, because
absolutely.
That's tough. But speaking of tough, we got a little bit of a bummer news also this week. Disney laid off about 14% of their Pixar workforce, which is roughly about 700 people. Disney's been looking to, as a lot of companies are looking to cost-cutting measures and things of that nature, but they did unfortunately put a lot of people out of work. Our thoughts go out to all those people that were affected by this. It's very unfortunate, and, hopefully those people land on their feet.
Yeah, I hate seeing that. Pixar has been such an incredible studio of what they've put out and pumped out. And we know around the COVID years and stuff here that a lot of stuff was going straight to digital. I think that hurt them a lot. It wasn't getting the theatrical releases. They were just pumping it out, putting on streaming, kind of forgetting it. I hated that, a studio that's created such incredible stories and things that are very heartfelt for adults but entertaining to kids, and they've blended that so well of doing the storytelling. It's a kids movie, but adults can find a lot of love and heart and everything else behind it. And just to see, people who have been creating that magic there for so long to lose their jobs, I hate to see it. Like they can, I don't think they've really done a bad movie. They've had some that maybe be lower, but I can't think of a really bad movie they've done. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but they've done some really great things. And I hope this doesn't keep them from continuing on as a great creative power.
Yeah, it seems to be a rough time in the animation industry as a whole, like you said, kind of tying the last topic in AI. How much is AI playing a factor in this, and will we start seeing a lot of that work getting outsourced to AI as opposed to, animators who have spent their entire lives, working on their craft and getting really good at this and creating these wonderful visual pieces of animated art that we get to watch. And what does that hold for the future of the industry? I don't know, but yeah, at the end of the day, man, it's all these families are affected by these cuts, and it just sucks to see, man. It's a hard story to talk about, and you're talking about people's livelihoods and passion projects that they may or may not have been working on. Did they at least get to finish the projects they were working on, or were they let go mid-project? I don't know. Don't want to get too much into the specifics there, but yeah, you just feel for those people going through.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because being creative myself and knowing what it takes to put in some stuff, I don't do animation, but I've done a whole lot of different designs and other stuff, and not have your work feel like, oh, that movie's terrible, or we're just going to let you go because it didn't make enough money. Like, it takes an army to make these films, and, they become a family as well. Like, I'm sure a lot of these were very well connected to each other, and you just hate to see anyone lose their jobs, or to have that many people, because I think this is a first ever layoff and cut for Pixar. So it's one that the studio, since it was started kind of, way back by basically Steve Jobs, started this, and everything that's gone through with what Brad Bird has done with all the films that he's made, they made a ton of strides in animation and filmmaking and storytelling, and to have now layoffs hit them, it's heartbreaking to see, because it kind of felt like it was a studio that could almost do no wrong, and was just, everything was printing money, and then COVID happened, and then their movies just wasn't making what they wanted to make. Even like Elemental, just watch it again with my kids. Fantastic, lovely, beautiful film. It started off so slow and low at the box office, and at the end, it slowly. I just clobbered my mic too, but it slowly started climbing up, and it had a good box office haul, but it didn't get that reception at first that it really should have, because it's a beautiful little film.
Yep. Agreed, and like we said, can't say it enough. Thoughts go out to the families that are affected by it, and hopefully, they can rebound and start moving on to other passion projects as well that get to showcase their talents, and hopefully earn a good living at that too. So hopefully those people land on their feet. I don't know of another way I could put it, really.
Yeah, we just want to see them as quickly as they need to be able to find a new home and a new place to animate and work, and hopefully they can find that as they need, and no one's put out too far from that.
Yep, hope so.
Moving on to movie news. So we have Mark Ruffalo and Chris Hemsworth are back together, but not as Thor and Hulk. So we have a crime movie that they're doing called Crime 101. It's a heist thriller that follows a detective that is zeroing in on a thief that is looking for one final score. So I would assume Mark's a detective, Chris is a thief. He's going to be chasing him down. It could be an interesting dynamic having those two together in something that is not the MCU.
Yeah, I mean, I know Chris is looking for other projects that, obviously aren't Thor related or MCU related to kind of stretch his acting muscles. He's got a couple hits on Netflix. He's in the Furiosa movie that we're getting ready to cover as well. So seeing him move on to some of these other roles, kind of stretch his acting legs a little bit, I'm all for it. So pairing him again with Mark Ruffalo, I know they have really good chemistry on camera together. I'm excited to see what that story winds up looking like.
Yeah, it could be a really fun movie. We've had a kind of resurgence of the crime and murder mysteries and other stuff. So as long as the story's right, this could be a ton of fun.
Yeah, looking forward to that when it comes out. But in kind of keeping with the murder mystery theme, we've had 2 Knives Out films already so far, and it looks like we're getting a third. It is going to be titled Wake Up Dead Man, and is going to be released on Netflix in 2025. So I know we've loved, both Knives Out and Glass Onion. We both love both of those murder mystery films. A ton of fun. It's off the wall silly, but still really well done. Daniel Craig has been the lead in both of those films. It sounds like he's going to be on board for the third one as well, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so it's going straight to Netflix, which I think is a little bit of an interesting choice. I know Knives Out did halfway decent at the box office, if I can remember, and Glass Onion did as well. So curious to see why they put it on Netflix. Is it going to also get a theatrical release? I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I've loved the movies. Like I said, we've had a resurgence of murder mysteries. We had The Death on the Nile and all those, Agatha Christie's, and then we've had with the Knives Out from Rian Johnson here. We've had this series. It's been a ton of fun. Like, you get some humor, you get some twists and turns. I'm really looking forward to it, and they're actually starting production very soon. Yeah. Looks like this summer they're going to start filming it to have it ready for 2025. So
that's exciting.
Bring it on. They've been interesting, intriguing, nice having those kind of twist movies that make you think a little bit in the theater while also entertaining you.
It's also been impressive both of the first two films, the stacked cast that they put in these. Like, big names sign up to be a part of these films in one shape, form, or another. So I'm excited to see who they add for the third one.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure it's going to have just as stacked as the other two because they've done well, and yeah, they're clearly getting a third. But yeah, we'll see how it fares on Netflix.
Yep, I love it.
So kind of keeping with streaming, heading over to Amazon, they finally commented on their announcement of Mr. and Mrs. Smith Season 2 because they said just straight out, Donald and Maya are not returning. Well, we left with a cliffhanger on Season 1, and they were a big part of why I think this show was, so good. They had such great chemistry together. And like, well, there's a chance that they're going to return because we haven't written the season yet. And okay, so why announce that they're not returning? I would assume they still probably are not going to be back for maybe an episode. Because he said you'll know what happens between Season 1 and Season 2 and where they go. So maybe they still have those plans to maybe kill off their characters or send their characters off in the first episode and then go into a new direction after that.
I kind of wonder if it's going to start like the way the first episode of the first season started, when you have a Mr. and Mrs. Smith that get kind of ambushed at the beginning and killed off at the very first, 5 to 10 minutes of that episode. And I'm wondering if that's going to be their involvement in the show is, the first 5 to 10 minutes, you get the Mr. and Mrs. Smith from the previous season and get the final bit of information about them before you move on to the next ones. I'm wondering if that's going to be the case with these two. Yeah. Like, you get them for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, one scene, and you see what happens in that explosion. Do they maybe get out? Do they maybe not? Do they get captured? Like, what's going to happen? And then kind of pick up with the next set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, it's what we kind of discussed in the previous episode about it, was that are they turning into a new model here that was kind of like the American Horror Story, that each season was, in the same universe, but you have a new cast and you have a lot of new stuff, and you can have characters that kind of appear without, but you're going in different themes or models, and maybe that's what they're doing here, is that either they're going to kill them off, or they're going to move, or they're off on doing another adventure, and we're going to follow this Mr. and Mrs. Smith. All right, Season 3, we have a different Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and maybe that's the model they're deciding they're going to go with, and the idea, because they say they don't have the season written yet, but they at least have to have ideas of knowing where they want to go to already make that type of announcement that they're not bringing back your main two stars.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully at the end of the day, they have the story in mind that they want to tell, and it winds up being entertaining. I know we wound up enjoying it. I don't know why it didn't pick up as much as it did, at least, like, maybe it got in the mix of a bunch of different other shows that, people were watching and weren't watching, but it didn't seem like it picked up a lot of steam. But it's enough that it's getting at least a second season, but they did seem to kind of backpedal a little quickly when they first said that they weren't. And they're like, well, maybe they probably got a little bit of backlash about it, right?
Yeah, and to admit that we haven't written the season yet, right. But because, taking on what was originally the Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie movie and turning into a series, we were wondering how much like the movie was going to be, and it was pretty different. I mean, it had the underlying elements to it. That one was more about a couple that were already married but didn't know each other were spies, and these were spies knowing that they're coming together for a spy marriage and actually falling for each other. So it gave a good and different take on it, which I actually really enjoyed the series. So I'm hoping it's just not that just blow them up in the first episode and move on to something else, because you started caring and getting really involved in these characters and how they portrayed them, and just to have them kind of axed off early might be maybe work against them.
It could. We'll see what stories they wind up telling with this next season, and see what kind of conclusion we can get for them before they move forward, how long into the next season that's going to take. Mm-hmm. Maybe an episode, maybe less than an episode, but we'll see. And hopefully that next season comes sooner than later and we get the answers that we're looking for.
Yep.
So now we want to move on into our TV review of the week. We've been doing a couple back-to-back episodic TV releases at the same time. We wanted to touch on a series that we both really enjoyed that came out recently, and that's Fallout, which is on Amazon Prime Video right now. All of the episodes are available to watch. It is one show that I've found myself really enjoying. It's based off of the Fallout series video games that were very popular. This series definitely didn't go in a direction I was necessarily expecting based on my knowledge of the games and having played them, but it was really well done and a lot more violent and gory than I anticipated too.
Oh, absolutely. That caught me off guard. Like, knowing playing the games, it can be that way as well. Sure. And it's a very weird, odd, quirky kind of world. Like, it's post-apocalyptic, but you kind of got a little Old West, and you got a little of this, and you got some weird gadgets and some in-jokes, and you've got like the old 50s music that's played through it out. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like, I think I ended up enjoying it a lot more than I expected to, especially all the nods it gave to the games, because I believe it's like 9 years after Fallout 4 is when this takes place, but it's not really telling the story of any of the games. It's part of the universe, but it's outside of all the games, because as the series ended, there's another game that was referenced, and they've referenced a lot of the games in the series. But I really loved, especially in the first episode, how we felt like we were watching a video game, of how she was, making her way through the vault and all that. Like, it had a lot of elements that really gave you, I'm watching a video game come to life.
Yeah, and for those of you who may be a little curious as to what this is about, you don't need to have played the video games to kind of understand what's going on. So let me set up a little bit of the premise for you. So there was a nuclear explosion, and then obviously the fallout of that, pun somewhat intended, but you have people that have kind of gone underground and lived in these areas called vaults, and all these vaults have numbers assigned to them. They're an unknown number of vaults, really, but the main season focus is on Vault 33, which is where the main series kind of picks up and goes from. But you also have the surface level, which is people that have survived and kind of the craziness that goes on in what's basically known as the wasteland of the fallout from this nuclear blast that's seemingly wiped off most of the existence, and people are kind of living in a kind of dystopian future type, think Wild West meets Mad Max kind of thing. It's kind of the vibe that you get from it. And the main character is a young girl named Lucy who comes from Vault 33, whose father gets abducted, and she goes on a hunt for him on the surface world, leaving the vault world behind. And the vault is kind of this, they kind of try to set it up as a utopian type of society where everything's perfect. There are no worries. We have everything we need down here, but we're all getting ready to, when we're ready to kind of go up to the surface world and rebuild the earth, how we have things running down here.
Yeah, and at the heart and core of this is Vault Tech, which is the company that made all the vaults, but there's also some deeper, sinister stuff behind this company, with underlying things of, their involvement in everything before the bombs dropped to how everything's went afterwards. So there's a deeper story of things that unwind as you go to learn about who was Vault Tech, who were these people that were doing all this stuff, who were setting us up for, after the wasteland. They're building all these vaults. I think 200 plus vaults in the game world. But, we are taking place in like 33, 32, 31 with the mystery around. Each one is very different from the other. And, yeah, I think she did an incredible job as Lucy. She had that sweetness and kindness, but also that, okay, I'm just going to shoot you now type of, I don't want to say evil, but just crazy in her eyes. Like, yeah, okay, I talked to you for a little bit. Now it's time to move on. Or, she has to do some pretty dark stuff in this series too, where we talk about, it was violent, it was gory, it showed a lot of stuff of just faces being ripped and just severed heads and a bunch of stuff. And like, it makes sense, but at the same time, I just wasn't expecting that to happen.
Yeah. It's campy violence is what I like to call it. It's got some of the lighthearted nature while also being brutal and violent and gory at the same time. And I really want to kind of give a little bit of flowers to an actor that you and I both love that seems to be fantastic in just about anything you put him in, and that's Walton Goggins.
Absolutely.
Who plays the character of, I forget what was his character.
So he plays the ghoul that's in the future, but he was also an actor with a different name before the bombs dropped. But yeah, he's fantastic as the ghoul.
Absolutely phenomenal as the ghoul. But you get a lot of this evil corporation in their attempts to basically monetize the end of the world, right? That's kind of the central theme of, Vault-Tec's role in this entire story is they're trying to, prepare for a doomsday scenario where they're the main company for everything, right? So that's kind of some of the sinister nature that you're talking about, and not to get into too specifics for those of you that haven't seen it, but it's so well told, and it's just wild and crazy in certain places, but also really, really thought-provoking in others too, because it's like, how would you handle the end of the world? What do you think the world would look like if the world were to end, but you made it through? How would you survive? What would you do for resources? What would you, and that's where it gets into the little bit of the Mad Maxian part of it, I think, is these people on the surface world who have to be incredibly hardened to survive in this landscape that they're living in now. And it's really well done and really well told, because there's a lot of craziness that comes out of this.
Yeah, and even to go touch on our other main character in Maximus. So it basically follows Lucy and Maximus as our main kind of stories. They're kind of telling two parallel stories, which they do end up meeting together, and we see how that evolves. He is on the Brotherhood of Steel side, so this is more of a cult military type of group, which you're seeing how does like a military presence, last and be out here in the wastelands. And they're definitely a group that it's wild and crazy, and they're very, that's why I called it more cult-like, because it's like you have to abide by the rules, how they want it exactly, much more than military can be strict, but this is and cult-like strict and crazy and everything else, because most, you have the Brotherhood of Steel, the ones who wear the armor, then you have the ones who have to carry their goods, which is comical at the same time. Hilarious. Because you have like Maximus starts off that he's working for one of the Brotherhood of Steel, and he's got to carry their bag, and the bag is literally 2 to 3 times the size of him, because the big mech suits are much bigger, and they're having to lug around these big suits and basically do whatever they're told when they're told to do it. And we actually got a really fun cameo out of that with who his guy was, with Michael Rappaport, and seeing him being in there, which it's been out long enough. If you're getting spoilers from this, sorry, but we'll touching on it a month and a half afterwards. But that was a really fun cameo. I wanted to touch on him just because he's another guy who's been in so much stuff, and I've really enjoyed seeing him. But it was kind of caught me off guard that was him underneath the helmet.
Because you couldn't tell based on the voice until the helmet actually came off that it was who it was. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. They're definitely setting up for multiple seasons of this. It has been renewed for multiple seasons. We really did enjoy it. It's wild, it's fun, it's absurd in a lot of ways, but absurd in a good way. Absurd in a very entertaining way. It is definitely not one meant for kids. Obviously, as we've talked about, it's very gory, violent, sexual in a lot of ways too. Like, it really is. There's and I know why you're laughing, and there's one particular scene that you and I both absolutely cracked up at, that's so direct and to the point that it's just funny.
Yeah, because with some of these characters, like Lucy, who's been in the vault for so long, she doesn't know a whole lot of stuff other than what's been taught to her. There's an elder and from the elders and stuff there. Maximus, on the other hand, he was orphaned as a kid, ended up with the Brotherhood of Steel, only learning what has to be done from the Brotherhood. So he is very, I wouldn't say dumb to a lot of things when it comes to relationships or women or anything else. Like, he is not up on a lot of things, so it leads to some really funny moments with him.
Yeah, the dialogue in that is, I don't want to sell it short by saying it's hysterical, but it's absolutely hysterical. I cracked up, and it's a lot of fun though. It's a fun series. It's a pleasant surprise for me, because when I heard that they were making this series, I was like, it could be kind of, I don't want to say corny is the bad word for it, but it's like, we've seen so many bad adaptations of video games in this series and shows, but here lately we've been getting quite a few good ones. It seems like they're finally getting the right people involved in these shows, and this is one that I think they hit a home run with, and I'm excited to see where they go moving forward, because it does leave some open-endedness by the end of the series, and where some of our characters are moving forward towards and things that they're working towards. So I'm excited to see the stories that they do tell moving forward. And a lot of these characters are going to be returning for the second season, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, as I mentioned, Fallout, the video game series, is very quirky. It touches on so many different aspects with the post-apocalyptic and the futuristic, along with going back to the golden age and all that. Like, it blends a lot of different genres and things together. And yeah, how are they going to make that work in live? They made it work, and then some in live action. Like it, and I felt like I was watching the video games. I felt like I was watching something new and interesting and different. And like I said, you had, Wild West type, you had Mad Max type, you had a lot of different genres, but they blended together so well. And yeah, you just got some really off the wall stuff where you weren't sure what you're going to expect, and a lot of underlying storylines are building up because we're learning who the ghouls are, and these are people that have been alive potentially up for 200 plus years since a bomb's dropped. Like, there's something that turned them into this, and we get a little bit of that mystery information given, but we're not like fully exposed, but we get a lot of exposed about Vault-Tec and everything else. And I think they did a great job of weaving all these different storylines between Lucy, Maximus, the Wasteland as a whole, and Vault-Tec and all that. Like, I can't recommend it enough. They've done such a good job of bringing this video game to life. And as I briefly touch on, like, there are several moments like this is an absolute video game. You can see the slow-mo that happens in the game and hitting certain parts, and just, I had to laugh in the beginning because she's just looking around and she's basically finding and looting up and, basically looting like you would in a video game, and moving around a video game, and like, all right, now we're looted. Now we can go to the main story stuff. And I love that aspect of paying tribute to the video games where it came from while also making its own thing. And like, there isn't anything I could really say that I was off put by with this series. Like, it is very quirky. It is a very weird, quirky series, but I loved it.
Yeah, it's very high entertaining. For those of you looking into watching it, it is available on Amazon Prime. There are 8 episodes in season 1. It's a fairly easy watch. You can get through it in a day if you wanted to binge watch an entire season. So the full season is out. All 8 episodes are available to watch. An hour or less per episode, and it's a lot of fun. It's definitely one that we could definitely want you to watch, and tell us what you think. Come join us on our Discord. Come comment on our videos and tell us what you thought about it as well. We would love to hear it, and we both really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Go check it out. If you're into anything sci-fi, Western, quirky, weird, either way, just go check it out and see what you think about it. Watch an episode or 2 and see if it sticks with you, because it was really good.
Don't show the kids.
Yeah, don't show the kids. I mean, everyone has a different opinion on what their kids can do, but it's definitely meant for an older crowd with what it does. So moving into our film review this week, we saw Furiosa, Mad Max Saga. So, Mad Max films have been around for quite a while, starting with Mel Gibson. It's actually been 9 years since Fury Road, where Furiosa's story started. I mean, Charlize Theron was the original Furiosa. Now we're getting a prequel with Anya Taylor-Joy. You have Chris Hemsworth as Dementis. You have Immortan Joe returning as well. The story basically starts off with Furiosa as a child. She's in the green place, and within this wasteland, there is a place where fruit and water and everything flows freely, and they're very protective of it. Seeing mainly women at the green place here that we could see, and they're very protective over it. And we end up getting a band of Dementis' guys end up finding the green place in the woods, and they kidnap Furiosa, and this kind of starts off a just wild chase and story and everything from there of what happens with Furiosa. How did we go from a young kid picking fruit in the green place to the crazy warrior that we saw in Fury Road?
Yeah, and it takes a tale, right? And all the things that she had to go through from that kidnapping to becoming this amazing, one-armed, essentially warrior that we know her to wind up becoming, and like this awesome, fighter in the wasteland and this leader of people. And you get that story here. And, Anya Taylor-Joy does a great job as Furiosa, I believe, in this. I was a little surprised at, honestly, how long it took to get to Anya Taylor-Joy, because she was kind of billed as the star, but they spend a good first half of this film as her as a kid, just kind of getting to that point to where she eventually grows up and becomes, the Anya Taylor-Joy version of this. So
I was going to touch on that because I think it was almost the first hour of the movie was with the younger non-Anya Taylor-Joy Furiosa.
Yeah, and she winds up making her way back to Dementis, who is, in my opinion, played by an absolutely brilliant Chris Hemsworth. You get like this image of Chris Hemsworth in your head, especially with him being so synonymous with the character Thor. He does a really good job as Dementis here, and Dementis is kind of this bombastic, like, group leader that's, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but he knows how to control his group of people, and they ride, he's almost, I want to say he's almost Joker-like in the way that...
A little bit, yeah.
He's got some Joker elements to him in the sense that, he's kind of this agent of chaos who's, I'm going to take your stuff and there's nothing you can do about it, kind of like this type of character. And he does such a good job of leading this group of people throughout the wasteland and kind of trying to take over this area to where, he's trying to provide for his group and he's trying to be the leader of this group. And you go on this journey with Furiosa and her making her way to them and what happens to Furiosa's mom at this point, which, spoiler alert, it's a drama, dark tragedy. It doesn't end well. But you see, like, her as Furiosa growing up and trying to get away from Dementis and, eventually Immortan Joe, who they make their way to, and, just her on basically a path for revenge here. And it's kind of the heart of the story here, but it's all these different groups trying to survive and trying to one up each other and trying to backstab each other, and it's a wild story. So if you know anything about George Miller films, they're very beautifully shot in a very distinct way that says this is a George Miller film.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is another one of those cases where it's very much, you could tell that it's a George Miller film. Very beautifully shot. The aesthetics are amazing. The story was really good. I really enjoyed it.
I do want to go back and touch on Chris Hemsworth's performance because if you looked at the trailer of it, it kind of looked like, all right, he's Wasteland Thor because he's got the long hair, he's got a cape, he's wearing kind of a different, I wouldn't say armor, but it's the weird clothing that you have in a post-apocalyptic world. And I didn't say post-apocalyptic well there. Yeah, I did the second time, but he did a good job in it because he did take you from looking at him from the trailers, oh, he's just kind of Wasteland Thor, to this demented, weird, quirky oddball. He gets to use his Australian and his normal Australian accent that's a little turned up, a little more high pitch, a little bit more out there. And yeah, he did a great job of making you kind of forget, like, no, I'm not a Wasteland Thor. I am this wild, crazy guy. Because with the Wastelands, we've learned that there's basically 4 places. You have the green place that they all want to get to, but they can't find.
Yeah, they call it a land of abundance, yeah.
You have Gastown, which is where all the fuel and everything comes from. You have Bullet Farm, which is where all the guns and stuff come from. And then you have Immortan Joe's Citadel that he kind of rules over. And, they're all fighting over these bits of land. And yeah, most of the story is about Dementis on his kind of rampage, and I'm going to take over everything. Everything is mine. That's how the world is. That's how the wasteland is. It's just
the world needs to be.
Everything is mine. And you get some crazy scenes out of that and some, really interesting stuff. But as you said with George Miller, it's his film when you're looking at it. It's a Mad Max film when you're looking at it. Like, I would love to pick his brain on how he comes up with all these vehicle designs. Like, you've got Chris Hemsworth. Dementis has motorcycle chariot, which is just insane to look at. Yeah. Absolutely love that. Then you go into his monster truck vehicle that was also ridiculous and over the top, and like everything is just over the top, big, crazy, weird, strange, but I loved it. Like, it was so much fun. He has a great visual presentation that he does. The cinematography, just the way he frames a picture is just amazing. You get really great storytelling from kind of less dialogue. Like, you don't have as much dialogue as you would expect with a film like this. You've got a lot of visual elements that tell the story for you. And, that's kind of what he's known for as well. And go from Fury Road to this. Like, Anya Taylor-Joy did a fantastic job taking on Furiosa. She disappeared into it, of the anger and everything that she brought to it. Like, there were some great fight scenes, some great chase scenes, and overall, like, I had a blast watching this movie in theaters.
Yeah, it's definitely a visual spectacle, but like you said, that's the kind of hallmark of a George Miller film. It's very visual, and they do a lot of narrative devices are told through visuals. And Anya Taylor-Joy maybe has in total 20 minutes worth of dialogue in this entire film, which is crazy considering, how great of an actress she is, and, her ability to, I don't want to say her ability to speak because that sounds a little ridiculous, but, she's a good dialogue actress as well. Doesn't have a ton, but she does a lot of emoting with her eyes and with her facial expressions. And, just like you said, the visual narrative that drives a lot of these stories. And there's so many cool elements, and it's definitely got some absurd elements too. Like, trying to chase up a very, very steep hill and the motorcycle's just falling over because they can't make the steep climb. And some of the absurd visual stuff that they put in, that's just kind of a little, I don't want to say comic relief, but it kind of breaks some of the tension a little bit. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of high tension in this film. Like you said, you have like these areas that you say just, they are kind of isolated and separate and kind of somewhat working harmoniously. A few of them try to get one over on the other business wise a little bit, but here you come, this giant wrecking ball in Dementus, ready to just rule the world in his vision and rule this wasteland the way he sees fit and deems it to be necessary. And he doesn't exactly have the greatest of success with it either. Like, he's successful, but he's not successful. You know what I mean? He knows how to take over certain areas, but he doesn't know how to sustain it.
He's not exactly a people person, being able to sustain things for a civilization living underneath him. He's more about him and his goons, and I need to provide for all these mouths and all this stuff. But yeah, Chris Hemsworth gave such a great performance, because you do see some changes through Dementus throughout, because when we first meet him, he is very cocky and confident that he's going to walk into every single area and it's just going to be mine. And then you see kind of how that unfolds, where he's starting to lose his mind a little bit, and he's like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I still want to take over stuff, and I want to do this, and I demand meetings, and I want to do this, and I want to do that, but he just has that look of defeat, and like he just doesn't know what he's doing and kind of going. But you got a good arc for him throughout the movie to see his rise and his fall.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from the initial attempted attack on Immortan Joe's citadel, right? So that's kind of the turning point for him, and it's somewhat early on in the film because he's very much successful going up to that point, and he takes, young Furiosa, and they try to take over the Citadel. He's like, oh, this has been easy up to this point. And Immortan Joe's like, no, you're not getting my land that easy. And he kind of starts to spiral throughout the rest of the film. And it's a wild, crazy run. So much action, so much, very gritty, very violent. And as a lot of these Mad Max films are. And it's just such a well-told story to get to that point, that if you're a fan of these Mad Max Furiosa films, you're going to love this one too, because it's very much in that same theme of, surviving in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and how this character of Furiosa becomes this amazing warrior that she does become.
Yeah, the Mad Max movies and George Miller movies, they're movies that are meant to watch in theaters. Like this is why we go to cinema, to see these crazy, over-the-top, visually beautiful, action-packed like movies. That's like, it's meant to be seen on a big screen, and we can't recommend enough going to your theater. We've already hearing that it's had an okay Memorial Day weekend. It hasn't had the best. Like, it deserves to be seen on a big screen. Go out to the theaters and see it. The sound, the crispness of the sound, the bright visuals. I don't want to say beautiful visuals because most of it's desert, but it's got such a great orange hue and such a great colorization to the film that it really makes you look at the desert in different ways, depending on where you are. And you also have the more, visually, they're all rusty places in the desert, but it makes Bullet Town look different from Gas Town, look different from the Citadel, and kind of give them all their own visual splendor so that almost like a video game. This is this location, that's that. They're all very distinct and unique from each other, but they all share a lot of similarities. And yeah, just the action was so over the top, some really good chase scenes, and even had I think the character's name was Jack that Furiosa ends up teaming up with on the war rigs and everything. Like, he had a very subdued, kind of Mad Max, Solid Snake, kind of blending a lot of characters, but he was a very soft-spoken, very just kind of laid-back character, but he plays an important part in it, and everything that happens with Furiosa as she has gotten older with, Anya Taylor-Joy, and that war rig with the back and everything was completely wild and over the top, and it was so good. Like I said, you expect these to be spectacles, it's over the top, insane, crazy, but it was 2 hours that went by very quickly, or 2.5.
It's about 2.5 hours.
Like, it went by very quickly. I was entertained the whole time. I had a blast with it. It could have started a little bit. I don't want to say it started slow. It was world building a lot with Furiosa and Dementis and everything that was happening. But like I said, when it spent so much time on the youngest version of Furiosa, it felt like once you got to Anya Taylor-Joy, it was like, let's go, 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 go all the way through.
Yeah, and it's at its heart a revenge story and kind of, getting justice for, the killing of her mother, right? And her trying to make her way back. Her entire premise is to get back to where she came from. And, she spends the whole film trying to work to get there. And it basically ends with where we pick up pretty much with, Fury Road. So it kind of leads directly into the events of that. And then eventually by the end of the film, when you get to the end credits, they start showing Fury Road and kind of how it picks up from there and kind of takes off, and you get some scenes from the Fury Road film to kind of tie it together at the end. It was kind of a neat way of tying the stories together, I think.
Yeah, it was neat, but it also brought up questions because we already know that George Miller is working on another Fury Road prequel, so there is something that happens in between Furiosa and Fury Road, and we kind of do lead into Fury Road. So kind of where is that story? How is that story taking place? Because as we mentioned, even though the wasteland there in Australia is big, there's only 4 real main areas. So is there something else he's telling with Mad Max or Furiosa or one of these other characters that we met that it's supposed to take place right before Fury Road? So kind of where we're leading up to that, where Furiosa ended, I want to see it just because these are great spectacles to watch in theaters. But yeah, I was kind of taken aback by them showing it leading directly into Fury Road, knowing there's something else coming in between. Yeah,
we'll be curious to see what they do story wise for that, for sure. Yeah. But it's definitely one we like you said, it's worth going to see in the theaters because it's meant to be seen on a big giant screen with the all encompassing sound. I think that actually enhances the film. Mm-hmm. The sound works together with the visuals as well. So if you see it in a theater that has, updated sound and, kind of high def and, intense sounding theaters, it's beautiful.
Especially the car audio, that's cranked up to 11.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So Furiosa Mad Max Saga is in theaters now. We highly recommend checking out if you want to have a fun, action-packed spectacle of a time in theaters. Go see it. Let us know in the comments of this video. Head over to our Discord. We'll talk about it. I'll start a thread on our Discord. We can talk about Furiosa, see what you liked, what you didn't like. There wasn't a whole lot I could say I disliked about the film. There's a few visual things that, well, you can tell that was green screened or that was CGI, but sure, it's a spectacle. I'm not holding that to a high level of it being perfect. It served its point, did what it did well. Highly recommend checking it out.
Absolutely.
So coming up this week in theaters, we have kind of a smaller release and a violent nature. So this is a horror film that I actually just saw the trailer for the first time right before we recorded this because I was trying to figure out what's coming out this week. There's nothing really big, and then I saw this, and it looked rather intriguing, giving me almost Jason the Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes. It's supposed to be really interesting, gory, over-the-top horror film. So if that's your thing, check it out this week in theaters.
Absolutely.
On the streaming side, so this actually dropped a few days ago on May 22nd. We got the behind the scenes. He assembled the making of X-Men 97. go back to all of our episodes where we reviewed X-Men 97, especially the last with the finale, see what we thought about it. But I haven't had a chance to check it out yet, but this is on my list that I've got to watch.
Absolutely.
The behind the scenes, the making of it, because I'm sure it's going to give us some great insights, but also just love seeing that, especially with animation and seeing how they brought that back to life after so long.
Absolutely.
Then on May 31st, we have Jim Henson, The Idea Man, on Disney+. So that's just another documentary by Ron Howard on Jim Henson that I'm really looking forward to. The man created so much of our childhood growing up in the 80s and 90s, and everything he did for generations that's still long-lasting. Like, I can't wait to see what they put together about his life.
Yeah, that's gonna be one that's gonna be a fun watch because, like you said, so iconic for so many things for a lot of people growing up. You love the Muppets, you love, anything like that still to this day are as popular now as they ever have been. You got Jim Henson to thank for that.
Yeah, I've got such a love for the 1990s, a first live action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which was a Jim Henson creation, was one of the last things he did before he passed. Like, I love those suits, that look, that movie, like everything to it. Like, the suits made that movie so iconic of how they looked. Like, the turtles felt real for the first time. Like, they were real to us. After watching the animated series and the comic books and everything else, these were real turtles.
It was amazing. It's such a beautiful film. One of my all-time favorites, honestly, because I do have such a deep love for the Ninja Turtles that first film was absolutely incredible. And it's still, honestly, going back and watching it again as an adult, you kind of forget just kind of how a little more on the dark side that film actually was. And I went back and watched it like fairly recently. I was like, oh my God, like I can't believe I didn't pick up on that when you were a kid. It's funny how your mind works when you're a kid versus an adult in that sense. But yeah, such a beautifully told film, and I'm very much looking forward to the documentary on him.
Yeah, his work on Turtles there, the Dark Crystals, everything he touched just seemed to be gold. And yeah, I can't wait to check out that documentary. So make sure to check that out on Disney Plus when it launches at the end of the month. On demand, we also had another surprise release. So The Fall Guy received a surprise drop on May 21st, so it's out to buy on digital. But there's also like a 20-minute extra extended cut that was released as well. Didn't know it was going to get a kind of a director's extended cut. Just kind of, hey, it's out tomorrow. I'm like, oh, okay.
We're seeing a lot more of that lately.
So yeah, before you would have a 3 to 4 month run in theaters, and then it would be maybe, I think 6 to 7 months after it started in theaters before we got it on digital or at home, and now it's weeks sometimes. And just out of the blue, like, all right, here, I know it hasn't been performing as well. We thought it was fun. Check out our review.
Absolutely.
And it was a good watch, but I'm surprised at kind of lower theatrical run that it's gotten, and just to kind of feel like a toss away. Just, all right, we're on demand. Let's go ahead and get it out of here without the hoopla. Like, just move on from it. Like, it was a good movie.
Yeah, we enjoyed
it. Didn't need to just be tossed on digital like that. For sure. Boy Kills World, which we talked about last episode, was actually delayed. So originally the date we were told was the 21st. It actually came out on the 28th. So we got that coming out. Again, watch our review.
Wild.
Kind of like Mad Max movies, wild, crazy, over the top. You don't know what to expect. It was a ton of fun as well. Check that out. And one that I haven't checked out yet, The First Omen, will drop on May 28th. So that's a horror movie that's got some pretty good buzz about it and seemed to do decently well for a horror movie. And, we're going to have that launching before the end of the month.
Excited for that one too. That's going to do it for this week's episode. We can't thank you enough again for all your continued support. We want to thank everybody that leaves comments on our social media videos, the people that have bought merch. Please check out the merch link on our videos when we drop our social media posts as well. Check out anything you may like in there. If you got feedback on things you'd love to see, we'd love your feedback on that as well. We're always down to, add more merch items that you feel like you might want to see as well. But coming up next week, we've had a little bit of a different episode. So full transparency here, Brad's going away on a trip for a week. We're not going to the theaters to actually review anything. We're not going to have any TV shows or movies, but we figured it'd be a fun episode to put together talking about some of our favorite guilty pleasure films. So we've got a list put together of the films that we want to talk about, some of the films that we enjoy that may not necessarily be the biggest box office successes, but ones that we find in our spare time that we find coming back to kind of repeatedly. So that's going to be a fun episode for us to watch. So we can't wait for you to check that out as well. But for now, I am Josh. This is Brad, and we can't thank you enough for watching, and we'll see you next week.